This definition of the Convention of Geneva, so an international agreement by which several countries from 1954 onward, when it's put into force, agree that they would give protection to refugees within this broad definition. This is partly the result of the Holocaust experience, but also partly an answer to the not respect of human rights in Eastern Europe. So it's also a part of the Cold War debate. With this Convention of Geneva and with the closing of the border of Eastern Europe, there hasn't been much difficulty with a refugee policy. This is also linked to a liberal immigration policy, because we are in that time, so 50s to 60s, we are in the time when there is an economic boom. So les 30 glorieuses, the 30 golden years of 1945, 1975, made that there was a lot of need of labor power. So anybody who came was welcome because one needed hands in the economy. It's only after 75 that problems arose with the refugee channel, with the institutional provision for asylum seekers, for refugees. Why is that? Because the whole refugee setup is part of a more global alien policy and is part of a more global protectionist immigration policy. Western European countries closed off their borders, have closed off their borders since the 1930s, since the interwar period, in order to have only people coming into the country which are needed, so only additional labor power. But in the 1930s, with the crisis in Nazi Germany, with the asylum seekers coming from Nazi Germany, it's clear, it's obvious for the authorities that they just can't close off their borders and only accept people they want, but that they should, if they consider themselves liberal countries, that they should also provide facilities, provide an openness for those who are not invited but who cannot return back because of persecution. So the possibility for refugees to ask for asylum is in fact a mean by which the whole protectionist immigration policy, which has been constructed in the 1930s and which still continues till nowadays, is made viable, is made livable, is a workable construction. Because you take away those who are most determined to come to your country or who don't have a way to go back. So those people you give asylum. It has, of course, also humanitarian reasons why a country does that, but it's also a rational way to handle with the pressure at your border, to give asylum to those who are the most insistent to come into your country and who can't go back. In the 1970s, when the economic crisis started, or rather the transition towards a post-industrial economy with very different labor needs, no needs anymore for labor for hands, but knowledge workers are still being demanded, but for people who just come into your country, there's mostly no job available. So those people who came in the 60s and the 50s, they couldn't come, they were not longer invited. So a lot of people, in order to enter the country, apply for asylum, because that's the only way to get into a country. So you get this booming of the number of asylum seekers, and also with much less people who are being eligible for asylum. So there's a very low recognition rate, 10% about, for asylum seekers who are considered as refugees.